to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat podcast, a platform that celebrates the rich tapestry of professional diversity with a particular emphasis on empowering women. We aim to foster diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA, for all, while recognizing and championing the achievements of everyone as a central pillar of our journey. In our conversations, we explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to diversity and empowerment. Today's virtual water cooler chat features Lisa Sun. I met Lisa Sun in person at her book signing, and I brought my mom with me so she may witness how Asian Americans boss up with such authenticity while building allies one at a time. Lisa is the founder and CEO of GRAVITAS, a company on a mission to catalyze confidence. Lisa is a dress whisperer. Her company, GRAVITAS, offers innovative size-inclusive apparel, styling solutions, and content designed to make women from the inside out. Before founding GRAVITAS, Sun spent 11 years at McKinsey Company, where she advised leading luxury fashion and beauty brands and retailers in the US, Asia, Europe, and Latin America on strategic and operational issues. Her first collection was featured in O, the Oprah Magazine, People, and The Today Show in the same month. Sun and GRAVITAS have been featured on CNN and in Forbes, Fast Company, New York Magazine, Elle, Marie Claire, InStyle, and more. GRAVITAS includes among its activities a commitment to AAPI causes and New York City's Garment District. Often called the dress whisperer, Lisa is also a highly sought-after public speaker who likes to impart her hard-won knowledge on GRAVITAS and how to best harness it to other women. GRAVITASNewYork.com. Lisa Sun. Let's get started.
Hi, Lisa. How are you doing? Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, because I know that you're treading around everywhere giving keynotes, so I really appreciate this.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so excited to see you. And we got a chance to meet each other in person, which is so special. And I got to meet your mom. So this is really special to get this time together.
Yes. And how is your mom for this Women's History Month?
She's great. Well, and it's Lunar New Year in Taiwan, and she's just having a great year of the dragon.
Awesome. She was a tiger mom before there was a thing called tiger mom, right? That's
totally. She really is. She's really.
So thank you so much. I actually just recommended your book to one of my friends who is a supervisory paralegal at ACLU NorCal. And I said, you know what, you're driving up, you should get the Audible of GRAVITAS. And so by the time you get to San Francisco, you'll become totally GRAVITAs up. He's like, okay, I'll do that. I said, I'll tell Lisa that Sarah said hi, but we will expect you to finish the quiz. myconfidencelanguage.com, right?
That's right. You can discover just how powerful you are at myconfidencelanguage.com.
Yes, exactly. See, I'm like a PR person. Can you share your story? I think one of the things that I really can relate to you is that we both came from parents that have Chinese restaurants. And then growing up with that grit. And then a lot of time, I don't know about you, but I ended up having to work a little bit more than I like to. And at the time, I wasn't sure whether that was the greatest thing. And one of the things that you talk about in your book is what Steve Jobs said: you cannot connect the dots with the future, but you have to connect the dots with the past. So looking at that, how did having your parents being entrepreneur immigrants get you to be where you are today, in your opinion?
Well, my parents are immigrants from Kaohsiung, Taiwan. They came to the US in the 70s. College educated, and my mom worked on a hamburger truck and my dad worked on a loading dock. They ended up owning a Mongolian barbecue. All you can eat, $4.95 at lunch, $12.95 at dinner. And I actually was an 8-year-old cashier in 1987. I can tell you now that an 8-year-old does not have the grip strength to run an old school carbon copy credit card machine. I had to lean up on the counter and push down hard, because if there was one number missing, my parents didn't get paid. So I always say immigrants, they believe in something before they can see it. And they can create something from nothing. They can will something into existence. I like to think that I'm very lucky that I grew up in the company of immigrant entrepreneurs, because that is what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And I think if you grew up with immigrant entrepreneurs, you learn resourcefulness, perseverance, grit. And I certainly took that with me from that point to then the second part of my story, spending 11 years at McKinsey Company, the management consulting firm, where most people stay 18 to 24 months. I spent 11 years there, which that takes some amount of grit and perseverance. I certainly learned client service, apprenticeship, mentorship, but it did take me twice as long to get to markers of leadership simply because I'm a woman of color. And so those two parts of my story are incredibly formative, which led me to the third part of in 2012, leaving McKinsey, taking a year off, going around the world. My mom convinced me to start my own business. And for over the last decade, running GRAVITAS, which is fashion, content, community, all designed to help catalyze confidence in people's lives.
And you were on Oprah, right?
So what ended up happening was when we launched the company, 6 weeks after we launched the company, Oprah Magazine did a 2-page feature on us. And then People Magazine did a full-page feature. And then we did Ambush Makeover with Jill Martin on the Today Show. So within 6 weeks of launching the company, we had this incredible groundswell of media support, which certainly for a young company running out of my 1-bedroom apartment at the time in New York City, catapulted us to very early success.
So do you think that you did anything differently so that today Oprah basically took notice, or do you think that your community brought that to her attention?
Well, the thing that happened is 6 months before I launched the company, I invited 200 people, friends, family, people I'd worked with, to beat up my business plan. So every night for 40 nights, 5 people a night, I invited to my apartment. I showed them what I was working on. I love feedback. I believe feedback is a gift. And I wanted people to have their fingerprints on the journey around what we were going to do. And I will say those sessions were so helpful because if you can't hear feedback from the people closest to you, then strangers, what they're going to say when you turn on the website to your company. And through the process of that, I had a friend say, "Hey, I know Oprah Magazine. Let me make an introduction." By the way, within 3 days, the creative director of Oprah Magazine was sitting in my apartment giving me feedback on the clothes. And he said, "This neckline's too high. You need to lower it. This sleeve should be longer." We made all of the adjustments he asked us to do. And then I emailed him in April and I said, "Thank you so much for that feedback in February. We made all the changes." He said, "Send it over. Let me take a look." And then a month before the feature came out, he sent us a handwritten note saying, "Congratulations, your pages 132 and 133 of our November issue." So what I always tell people, Oprah Magazine, Oprah, Adam Glassman, they all change people's lives just because they have a platform to amplify things that they feel are special and important and making a difference. But on my side, I am not the type of entrepreneur that asks anyone to sign an NDA. Everyone has a good idea. We're all walking around with good ideas. Entrepreneurs have the will to execute. So I always say, I'm always talking about my next big idea because maybe you'll have feedback. Maybe you'll have someone who might help me. So I love to have people have fingerprints on the journey, but that's how that all came together is I wasn't afraid to show people what I was working on.
Is this a little bit in contradiction with what Asian culture is traditionally like? Because at least I believe that the traditional culture tend to talk the idea because they don't want someone to steal theirs.
That is one element, but I actually think our culture is very communal. I think that at least the tiny Asian community or the Taiwanese American community I grew up with, if someone had a problem in the community, everyone would come help. When my parents built their restaurant, it was like a community pool of money that helped them open that restaurant, right? And so I don't know if it's Asian or not Asian. For me, it's more that when you allow people to have fingerprints on the journey, you're that much more successful. I think that we might have pride in that we want to be known for our accomplishments and our achievements and things that make us unique. And I do think accomplishment and achievement is a way to bury a lot of the suffering and pain and sacrifice we've made to be successful. The best example of that I'll use is my mom and dad, when I got into Yale, they bought Yale Mom and Yale Dad t-shirts and they wore them all the time. And I was so embarrassed. But now, a few years ago, I asked my mom why. And she said, no one treats you like a dumb immigrant if you have a daughter who goes to Yale. And so that was armor for them. They wore it so much because they didn't want people to say, oh, like, you don't speak English well, you must be dumb, or you run a Chinese restaurant. My parents like, my daughter goes to Yale. I'm actually quite smart and accomplished in my own right. I think we have pride, we have achievement, but I think of the Asian community, the Taiwanese American community, as being very communal and supportive. So I don't know if there was anything contradictory in that. I just think the idea of feedback is a gift. You should invite people to be on the journey with you is just a universal lesson.
That's great. I'm not saying that I'm agreeing or disagreeing. When I was in school, I studied East Asian languages and cultures. So that was much more classical and traditional. So that seems like it might have been a lot more people like hogging ideas and not disclosing until they fully develop. So it seems wonderful that you actually are able to put yourself out there and get the feedback that you need.
Maybe it's an American immigrant journey then. It might be that I just finished Helen Zia's book, Asian American Dreams, which anyone who wants to understand the creation of Asian American culture, it's one of my favorite books. And she actually talked about, Korean communities in New York City who had community loan pools. And that's how a lot of people were able to establish a lot of their businesses in New York City, is because they pooled money. So maybe that's a more classical interpretation, but my experience is the more you invite people in, the more they feel invested in your success.
So one of the things that I did with my book is that I started doing like coffee and boba collab, because I'm trying to go out there. I'm not going to invite everybody to come to my apartment. My mom lives up there. So I started finding local coffee shop, local boba shop, minority owned, so that when I go there, I'll buy gift cards and support their journey as well. And so the next one that I'm going to go is with this boba shop that they have 2 locations. I just walk up, and I think part of it has to do with me going to your book signing. I kind of witnessed how you have such a strong community coming to the book signing, at least the one, definitely in the one in DC. I didn't go to all of your tours. And I just walked up to this boba shop one day and meeting my friend, and she was on time, I was early. So I went and up there and I said, I'm going to get XYZ, for the drink, but I'm a published author. I was wondering if there's any chance to collaborate, and I want to do like a book collab here. And then they go like, tell me more. So then from that on, I think that community engagement is so important, especially nowadays that we're living in our either hybrid world. People are very isolated. There's not enough sense of belonging. Now, I have to definitely learn from you in terms of how to do PR, because I still have a lot to learn, but I'm still uncomfortable in saying that I'm a published author. And so that is something that I was listening. And when I took the quizzes, I got like superpower in all 8.
Great. I believe that.
Yeah. And that's my aspirational take. This is my second take. The first one, it was really interesting. The first one, self-sustaining, was not superpower. It was not bad, but I was totally talking up your book, obviously. And I was telling Sarah earlier that I find myself in the past 6 months, I care less about what people think of me.
Well, I would say 2 things, Ashley, right? The first is, I do believe you walk the talk of lifting others up. You showed up at my book signing. You bought 10 copies. You said, I want you to sign them. Well, you brought your mom, which I loved, but you said, I want you to sign them because I'm going to give them out and support you because I know the work is valuable. You bought tickets to one of my virtual workshops and gave them away because you're like, I want to support you, but I also know people will get a lot out of the content. So the first thing is you're already walking the talk, right? And I think the hardest thing to do is the second part, which is doing it for yourself. And so one of the most important things is if you took the quiz, and I know we're going to talk about those 8 superpowers, if self-sustaining was the area of opportunity, what I would say is you're not trusting that you have all these superpowers. And because you don't have self-sustaining, which says, I know my value, I know my worth, I trust in myself, you weren't giving yourself credit for the other 7, even though you tested into having them. And so it's really that 8th element of self-sustaining, which says, it's not that I don't care what you think. It's that I know my value. I know my worth. I trust in my own abilities so that in promoting your work, you know that it carries value and you know you have all of the skills required to make it a success. So it's really a mindset. It's whether or not you believe in all your capabilities and you believe in the quality of the book you've written, that you can then go and advocate for it. So I love that you think I've done a great job with my book PR. First of all, I had a lot of people involved. It was not just me. It was everything from the publisher, the publicist, Claire, who works on my team, my entire team getting involved, our customer file, all my friends and family, right? I certainly activated a very large network, which I think is what we were getting back to in the original point, which is the community that we have built. We've given a lot to it, but we're not afraid to ask of it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is being able to support others. I would just put yourself in that same list of people you're supporting, right? So much of the time it's easy for us to do for others what we can't do for ourselves. And that is that eighth quality of self-sustaining, is you're willing to do it for yourself too.
Could not have said it better. That's why you wrote the book.
Yeah, but here's the thing is you'll get in line to beat yourself up. Okay. You're like, oh my gosh, let me be hard on myself. Let me I'm like, get out of that line, right? Like you don't need to be in the line of self-loathing and get into a different line where you're your biggest cheerleader. I think that's the really hard thing. I wrote the book that I needed to read myself because every day the world will stand in line to be against you. Don't get in that line. I am for how strong I am, the mindset. If you handed yourself a transcript of how you talk to yourself, are you proud of that transcript? Or are you like, oh my gosh, I'm so angry at myself every day? Netflix has all these documentaries about sports now, right? And I watched the one called Full Swing, which is all about golfers. And they did an episode this year, which was all called Mind Games. And what you realize is all golfers that are professional golfers are pretty awesome. They're actually all trained at the same level. It's the ones that take the mental mindset to not beat themselves up, because there's always going to be one hole on the course that they don't do well on. And can they pull themselves out of that tailspin? Can they say, you know what? I'm a really good golfer, and the next hole I'll get it back, because life doesn't get easier. We get stronger. And if anyone's watching the documentary Full Swing, watch the episode called Mind Games, because it's very clear. There's one golfer who has a sports coach, has a sports therapist, and she teaches him how to not hate himself on the golf course. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wrote a whole book about the same thing. Could I go be maybe I can go be a golf coach now.
Well, we'll make sure there's some golfers here about this. You are a great storyteller. And I think a lot of it, what you said at the book signing, was that you growing up, and also from different podcasts that you had from very early on, that your dad drove you to Toastmasters. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because someone recommended that I go do that, and I had signed up for the local chapters. But I want to kind of hear from you, especially at such a young age, to go into Toastmaster International.
Well, your life story is your leadership story, right? And of the 8 superpowers that we identified through our research, one of the 8 is performing, which is extroversion, public speaking, being able to captivate an audience. It's actually the quality that the fewest percentage of people have when we surveyed people. And it doesn't mean you're confident, by the way. And I think that is really why I wrote the book. Extroversion and charisma is not confidence. Confidence, if you look up in the dictionary, is an understanding and appreciation of your own abilities. It's not performance, bravado, or swagger. If you go to Asia, they define confidence very differently than we do in America. So we call it performing as a superpower. I have that a lot. I have performing at a very high degree. It doesn't mean that I'm secure, right? It doesn't mean that I don't have self-sustaining FI. That's one of my opportunity areas. But the reason why I score so highly on performing is I started high school at the age of 12. I had skipped 2 grades. And my parents had aspirations for me to go to an Ivy League college. At the time in 1992, Ivy League colleges were $28,000 a year. There's no way my parents, from running a Chinese restaurant, had $28,000 a year. And this was before scholarships and financial aid. And, I could probably get a student loan that was a very aggressive one. And my father asked around town and said, how how can my kid make $28,000 a year? And there was a gentleman from the Rotary Club who said, hey, we sponsor these student speaking competitions, and your kid can win $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 if she makes it to nationals and wins to go to college. And there was a local chapter of Toastmasters. Toastmasters does not allow kids to be Toastmasters, FYI. They don't invite children. But my dad said, well, what if I sign up and she comes and just listens in, or she practices her speeches every once in a while in front of you all? And Toastmasters was this unbelievable risk-free environment for my father to learn to speak English better. And I got to learn a lot of the core principles of speaking, just getting to be around him and be around them. So it led me to being able to win all this prize money to pay for my first year of college. I am a huge fan of Toastmasters. I think it's now $60 a year. It's a nonprofit. Most groups meet monthly or biweekly. Some meet every week. The one in my parents' hometown in California met every week. And they teach you how to become a great public speaker. So I'm a huge fan. It's a nonprofit. It is fun to be around other people also trying to get better at it. And you can try things without worrying about your boss evaluating you or your friends judging you. These are strangers that are just excited to help you become a better speaker.
I think they have both virtual and also in-person event, because I know someone that I know, his name is Sasha Strauss, and he is a branding strategist, and he owns a branding consultancy in LA called Innovation Protocol. So he was on Simon Sinek's platform. And that's how I got to know Deepak, because I took Deepak's course. So I became friends with Sasha. And when I went to LA last time and meet up with him and his assistant, and I said that I need to really improve my public speaking, he was like, sign up for Toastmasters. So I did.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a hit and miss, because some of the people, they don't always update it. So I will need to do a better job in finding one that actually does read, So thank you. I was like very intrigued when you told me that 12 years old, you were going to Toastmasters. Wow, she really got some guts. Good for you. Now, we cannot have this podcast episode without talking a little bit about Deepa. She is an amazing woman. And I read her book, The First, The Few, The Only. And in that, there was one chapter that talked about Lisa. And last year, when I first launched the podcast, she didn't ask me, how many audience do you have? Because most people do ask that question. How many followers do you have? She just said, just let me know when you want to meet. So we did our season 1 podcast with Deepa. And during that, I actually asked, I was like, I really feel a lot of similarities, and I can feel for this Lisa's son. And then before you know it, I started looking at social media, and Lisa is having her book out on GRAVITAS. So of course I have the buy-in and support. How did you meet Deepa?
First of all, I think this is really what's great about what's happening in the women's movement right now, where we're focused on abundance and not scarcity. We're not seeing each other as competition, but we're seeing each other as hype women. Like that's what Aaron Gallagher's phrase is, that we can hype each other, we can connect each other. I think we're so much stronger when we have linked arms. When you link arms, it's harder to push you over. So I think that's a great example where we are pretty much unselfish. We're very selfless in opening our Rolodexes and introducing each other to really cool ideas and people that are making a difference. So Deepa is the sister of one of the wonderful women I went to college with. And she was still at Deloitte at the time and doing a really impressive tour around the country, bringing great women across industries together. And she came to New York. I went to one of her dinner salons and we hit it off and got a chance to hear about what she was planning to do with her book and her platform. And obviously, I wanted to be a part of it and support her.
Well, now I know both of you, and both of you are amazing. I also bought a bunch of Deepa's book and gave it out.
I will say, when people ask me, how can I support you? I feel like, Ashley, you wrote the textbook on how you can support an author, right? So show up. Buy extra copies to give away. You are great on social media around sharing things that you loved about the book, being able to create platforms for people to share their information, writing reviews, right? There's all these ways. If you love the work and you believe in the work, then being an advocate for it is really how these things take off.
And then one of the other things, because I have some Gen Zers in my company, and one of the things that I decided to do, have them do, is to do book review. Because I here's your book report assignment for the next Wonderlist, for 300 to 400 words, and then some of them come back with really quite amazing. So the A strength: leading, performing, achieving, giving, knowing, creating, believing, and self-sustaining. I think we touched a little bit about that before. If people are not particularly strong in one area, taking your quiz, how would they go about growing?
Before we even get there, right? If you take the fundamental thesis of the book, the book starts with saying, we as a society have been thinking about confidence in an incomplete way for centuries. And the analogy I use is we're born fully self-confident. If you talk to a 5-year-old, a 5-year-old is in love with themselves. They'll tell you everything they're the best at in the world. And at that point, you haven't developed an inner critic. And most of us during our adolescence, between the ages of 8 and 12, have an inner critic that develops because you start to be self-conscious, you start to experience setbacks, disappointment. In the book, we've identified 6 forces that hold us back. They're actually limitations to us being fully self-confident. So in order to be confident again, we have to be able to break out of these 6 forces. So I say you have to make a choice to have a different mindset. And self-confidence is really a choice and a mindset before it becomes a behavior. It's like an iceberg. You only see the behavior, the little 10% of the iceberg that you can see above the water. 90% is below the waterline. It's thoughts, values, and feelings. The best way to tap into the most positive mindset that forms the basis of self-esteem is to take an inventory of your strengths and talents. And that's where we did all this quantitative research to identify these 8 superpowers. These superpowers are a way for you to take stock of what makes you truly powerful. So before you even get to like, how do I fix the ones I don't have? You first have to know which ones you do. And I think most of us have a hard time paying ourselves a compliment. So first, love your superpowers. When I took the quiz the first time 5 years ago, I had 3 of them: leading, performing, and creating. And then when I stepped back and thought about it, I'm like, yeah, that is me. I like to be in charge. I'm extroverted. I love ideas and creating new things. That is who I am. And then from there, you then say, okay, do I want more? Do I want more than the 3 I have? As most people age, they go from having 2 superpowers to 4 or more. And in fact, people over the age of 50 have the most number of superpowers. And I just love that because, they are the most powerful in our data set. It's a counter to the idea of society as ageist. And we did in chapter 6 a correlation analysis. We took 30 situations in life. And in our survey work, we said, which of these situations do you feel capable of handling? And we took people who were capable of handling a situation and we correlated it to which superpower they had. And so in chapter 6, we can say, okay, which of these 30 situations do you want in life? Here's the superpower you need. So public speaking, you need to have leading and performing. And I would say, you go, okay, do I have that? Oh, I have that. That's one of my superpowers. I'm just going to trust myself. I'm not going to doubt myself in that situation. But if you get a situation where there's a superpower you don't have, then you can say, hey, I really want that in my life. I'm going to go develop that superpower. I'm going to go and start working on it. But don't choose a superpower just because you think you should have it. Choose it because there's a specific goal or an outcome or objective you want in your life. So the one that I always use is asking for a raise is self-sustaining. When you ask for money, it's self-sustaining. Asking for a promotion, by the way, they were 2 different questions in our survey, is achieving as a superpower. Here's why I deserve more responsibility. Here are my accomplishments. Here's why I deserve a different title change. Asking for money is, this is my market value. If you don't want to pay it, another company will, and I'm willing to walk away. It's not going to hurt my feelings because I know I'm worth it. And so that's why you need self-sustaining. It's not because you just want it, because there's something you want to accomplish in life. So when I took the quiz, I realized that there were 2 things that I wanted that I didn't have. One was recovery and resilience. So getting over bad things in my life. And the superpowers you need are believing and self-sustaining. So you need optimism, and you need to not feel spiraling out of control when someone criticizes you or you have a setback or disappointment. So I said to everyone, I'm going to work on believing in self-sustaining. Those are two qualities that I'm going to add. The other one was caring for external validation or what people thought of me. And I was like, I do care too much. And so I said self-sustaining. But I don't need achieving and knowing. I don't have those superpowers because I hire people on my team that those are their superpowers. Knowing is all about research and process and building IKEA furniture perfectly. I hate that. I don't get any energy out of spreadsheets, but most of my team does. So I was like, I'm not going to work on knowing as a superpower because I really hate Excel, but I'm going to bring people onto my team that's what they love. They get energy out of organizing things. And so that's how I think about these superpowers. If you don't have them, do you want to hire someone or hire an agency or collaborate with a friend who has that superpower? Like whenever I have to build IKEA furniture, I always invite one of my friends to come help me just because I will give up after reading the manual. Or, hey, no, that's something I really want. And I want to control my own development and learning journey.
That's amazing. When I build furniture, I actually invite my friends and I just buy them lunch.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
That's not my superpower. That's not my superpower.
And then some people really get, more kicked out of this, and also building a team. So the next question is on leadership. In the book, you talk about people were saying that you were a steamroller. And when you were working, I think maybe at McKinsey Company at that time, I also had a very high standard that people could not really meet when I was working as a case manager. Litigation has a lot of demanding overtime. And a lot of time when no one else is doing the work, then I just have to end up doing it because the deadline is there. Not the most effective way, but it gets the job done. And people also start treating you, not only because you are reliable, but because they know that you will get it done. So it's not necessarily a great leadership skill. So reading your book and knowing what I know now, because trial and error, I started looking for complementary skills. Like the superpower that other people have, like, for example, I have kids that really enjoy data analytics, and I do not. So I say, hey, you don't do that. When I told them that I'm going to talk to the people from my committee and we will invite you to come help, they were just so happy to be able to be valued. 22 years old. Of course, it was like, oh, you invite them to work with a group of attorneys to work on something that really means something to them. I think that I really got a lot out of your talk at the book signings. And my mom still talking about, wow, that Lisa knows everybody. I was like, yeah, she does knows everybody.
I love that you came to the DC book signing. What I would say is one of the superpowers that you just highlighted is leading. And every superpower has a downside. Every superpower has its strengths, but also has downsides. And when it comes to leading being almost too much, almost too commander, I'm in control, you start to realize you end up doing everything yourself. So I love that that's what you took away from that section in chapter 4. I'm really lucky in that I've learned over time that people with different profiles of strengths than me, I get along with best because together we have all 8 superpowers and can get more done. Or complementary, leaving space. I still have high standards. I'm not saying not to have high standards, but there are so many routes to getting there that aren't just the way you want to do it. I think the second thing, and the DC reading, my favorite moment of that is one of my former colleagues from McKinsey said, I'm going to call BS on you. In the book, I talk about being told I didn't have any gravitas in my 20s. And she said, I'm going to call BS on you. I thought you were a very confident 22-year-old. I don't think this is true. And I said, I was really, really good at faking it because performing is my superpower. I was really good at pretending I was confident, but I was deeply insecure and overachieving. And if I could go back in time and give myself my book, I would have really enjoyed it more. And if you remember, my former colleague said, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, you were faking it because you thought confidence just meant charisma and extroversion and speaking up and assertiveness and being outspoken. But really what you're saying is, how do you become secure in yourself? You don't have to be loud and outspoken to like yourself. And that's really why I wrote the book.
I think that is so true because Year one, when I came out to start my own company, I was still really deeply, fake it till you make it, is deeply rooted in my mindset because that's what people do. But then after that, I really did take a lot of courses and webinar from Silence and X platform. So one of the person that I took was Kristen Hardy. Her book is Permission to Screw Up. And I love Brene Brown about the vulnerability and how not to use vulnerability to be manipulated. But overall, it's like you don't fake it till you make it. But then the balance of striking between exercising or exhibiting your vulnerability authentically and not using it as a power to manipulate to get like what you want. I think a lot of it is what I have been really learning. It's kind of good that I don't have to have too many people to please in terms of it's my own company. So if I can make the payroll, great, it would happen. And I think that you most likely have that freedom. It's a lot of headache. Mm-hmm. Just making that payroll is very like, it could be nerve-wracking.
It's hard.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard. It's hard. I don't know how empowering it is. It's hard.
Okay, last thing. If you were to give two pieces of advice to the younger generation to have more gravitas, what would be the advice that you would give?
The two pieces of advice, I'd say the first would be the mentor chooses you. You don't choose the mentor, make yourself mentorable. And I think so much of what we've been conditioned to do is be girl bosses and come in too confident. So first of all, I think making sure you ask for one thing you could do better, being seen as the person who's very coachable, who's anxious to get better, improve, learn from people who've been there longer than them. I think that's really important. And that's defining. I mean, you saw the community that felt like they raised me. And so one, make yourself mentorable. I think two, I do think that many younger people have been sold a lie, which is you have to lean in and be a girl boss. I loved those books, by the way. And I think it's important. They ushered in an important conversation around empowerment and being able to advocate for ourselves. At the same time, you know, there is a ton of humility that comes with earning the right to be more and more capable of leaning in. And so again, maybe it's the same piece of advice around allowing people to have fingerprints on your journey, allowing yourself permission to grow, learn, and fail, and learn from every step of the journey.
If people wanted to connect with you, I guess LinkedIn, and what is your website address?
I always say connect with me on LinkedIn. On Instagram, it's at Lisa Elle Sun or at Gravitas New York. In terms of websites, I would say myconfidencelanguage.com. Go take the quiz. I think that's the easiest way to get to know what all of this is about.
Perfect. Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I also saw that you are going to be a keynote speaker for another conference. So congratulations. And again, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much, Ashley. So grateful for your friendship.